Hi, welcome back to another episode of Nobody's Doing It Right, the podcast for those who are uncertain. My name is Kat. I'm your host. For today's episode, we're going to be talking about why you might be feeling so indecisive, and maybe it's not really indecision. This is something that I've experienced a lot throughout my life, and only now am I coming to an actual realization and awareness of what is going on beneath the surface. So I wanted to share it in case anybody else feels this way too and doesn't really understand why. So hopefully if this resonates with you, great. If it doesn't, that's fine. It's not going to resonate with everybody, of course. But this is something that I'm exploring on my own with my therapist. And I think the years of being on a, personal growth journey, just practicing my self-awareness has helped me get to this place. So I'm not trying to suggest that everybody should already understand this and this is what you need to know. I really don't like that kind of discourse around personal growth and self-awareness. I think everybody's timing is their timing. Sometimes you need to experience things in your own specific way until you get to these realizations. So this is something that I've had to take years to understand. Even now, I'm still only just understanding it. So maybe you're not indecisive. Maybe you've just collected more data. Data. I say data. But what I mean by this is anybody else who's a perfectionist, I was about to say people pleaser, but that's a different topic. Anybody else who is a perfectionist probably feels the 0 to 100 experience, the all or nothing experience, this idea that you have to know immediately what you want, how you want it, how it has to be, having all the information so that you can be perfect. Now, of course, that's not realistic because life is imperfect. There is no way to be perfect. Perfection doesn't exist. And so if you are stuck in the mindset of perfection, like I have to know immediately what to do, how to do it so that I am good, I am right, I am perfect, so that I don't get abandoned, rejected, made to feel unworthy, all those things, you will probably, as I've learned in my own experience, hold yourself back from allowing space to collect more information. But of course, the process of life is constantly to collect more information. So if you're experiencing this indecisiveness all the time, like say you constantly find yourself in places where you think this is what I want to do, this is my life, this is how I want it to be, I really want to start this project and that's going to be what I do for the rest of my life, you're in that, intense place of this is it, like this is what I want to do. And then, maybe a couple of months later, you don't want to do it anymore. And you're like, well, why am I so indecisive? Why am I like such a flip-flopper? Why can't I just stick with the thing I say? And maybe you start losing some self-trust because of that. Because you're saying, well, how can I trust my judgment if one day I say I want this thing and then the next day or a couple of weeks later, months later, I don't want it anymore. And what I've had to learn and what I want to say to anybody else who's feeling this way is that maybe it's not a problem with you, that you are inherently wrong or inherently bad or indecisive or you can't make up your mind or you can't be trusted or you don't know what you're doing. Maybe it's just that the way you're looking at things from this perfectionist, all or nothing, 0 to 100 mindset is what's affecting this. Maybe that's the reason you feel indecisive and flip-floppy. Maybe it's because you're thinking, I have to know everything immediately right away. So this thing that I'm deciding on right now has to be it forever because I have to be perfect. So that means I have to have all the information that I need right now. And you're not leaving space and opportunity to gain more information to understand if this is something you actually want later on down the line. So when you start getting that information, as you inevitably will, and maybe you start realizing, oh, you know what, this actually isn't that aligned with me, which not many things are in life, and that's okay. You don't want to do it anymore, but now you feel like a failure because you're like, well, I said I 100% wanted to do this before, and now I don't. So like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just stick with something? Why am I so awful or indecisive or incapable or whatever other self-limiting beliefs there are there? And maybe it's not you inherently. Maybe it's just the way you're framing this experience in your mind. Now, this is something I am currently working through. It's something I've struggled with my entire life. And I've seen it perpetuated in my family dynamics too. I've seen other people in my family experience this too. So I'm realizing, okay, this is not a genetic thing. This is something that we have learned in terms of how we approach our experiences. There is something there that has to do with feeling like we have to know everything immediately, and also somewhat tied to the concept of a fantasy. As in, this thing that I am deciding on right now in this moment, is going to be the thing that saves me, or it's going to be the thing that makes everything perfect, or once I get this thing, or once I do this thing or achieve this outcome or whatever, things are going to be perfect. And finally I can relax and experience relief and whatever. And the fantasy, of course, does not lend itself to getting more information either, because you cannot exist in a fantasy state and also gain more information and more data and understand more and more about whether or not this thing's aligned with you. Those things can't coexist. A fantasy is to not have information, right? The only way a fantasy can survive is to not have the reality and the information and the data that you need to really know what it is. So if you struggle with this, I would implore you to look at your mindset around things. Ask yourself if there is some level of perfection that you're trying to achieve. This idea of, this is who I am, this is what I need, this is what I'm going to be. If I decide on it now, I have to know 100% immediately. There's no room for changing my mind. There's no room for getting more information. But inevitably, when you do change your mind because you've gotten more information, because that's unavoidable, you then feel like a failure. And also ask yourself if there's a level of fantasy involved in these decisions that you make. Are you going after these decisions that you are very intensely for in the moment? Are they from a place of fantasy? Are they from a place of, this thing is going to save me? This thing, this person even, is going to finally make me feel okay, or everything's going to feel okay once I get it, and life's going to be easy and whatever. That is a fantasy, because nothing can do that for you. Yeah, some things in life, of course, can make you feel more ease and, more comfortable, of course, but nothing's going to relieve you from the feelings that you might be experiencing just of being a human, right? Which is the uncertainty of life and the discomfort of life. Nothing can relieve that for you. That is just the experience of being human. So if you're making decisions or going after things, starting projects, going after jobs, people that you think, once I get this thing, things are going to be perfect, and I know I want it right now because I want that perfect outcome, that fantasy outcome. Maybe you don't consciously understand this, but dig deep. Really, really ask yourself, is this logical? Is this realistic? Am I looking at the realism of this? Am I looking at the messiness of this and how it fits into an imperfect life? Or is it evoking a feeling of excitement because of the fantasy, right? Excitement because, this is finally the thing that's going to fix everything. If that's what's pushing you towards these decisions, and you are getting so excited immediately, and you're thinking this is it forever now, then of course I think inevitably you will end up flip-flopping, because that's not sustainable long-term, because it's not realistic to the human experience. And so it'll make you feel then indecisive. It'll make you feel like you can't trust yourself. You can't trust your judgment moving forward, because if you keep cycling through this pattern, of course, you're going to feel like, well, how can I trust that this new thing is what I really want if all the past new things that I went after that I was so sure about ended up being something that I stopped doing? And then, of course, that chips away your self-trust, and chipping away at your self-trust then ruins your self-worth, and then makes you continue these cycles over and over again. So I think the key is to try and nip it in the bud, rather than always seeking that thing, because I don't think that thing exists. And this is a hard realization to have. I'm even struggling with the disillusionment of it, because I think societally, culturally, we're told that there is something that's going to fix everything. There is something to attain that's going to make everything perfect. But there isn't. And that's actually a very liberating thing. It can be kind of depressing at times, I think, but I think it's liberating for the most part, because then you can kind of become a bit more content with life as it is, in all its imperfection, in all its discomfort, and rest assured that you're doing it right? The discomfort that you're experiencing, the disillusionment, the imperfection is not a sign that you're doing it wrong. It's actually a sign that you're doing it right, because that is what life is. So then you don't have to seek things out or people out that you think will make everything perfect, because obviously that's not realistic. You're not looking for perfection anymore. You're not looking for a relief from discomfort anymore. So what would you do then if you weren't trying to seek things out in fantasy? What would you actually go after if that was not the point of what you're doing and why you're doing it? And then I think that brings you a little bit more to a grounded place and to more logical thinking that can actually help you decide on things that you can stick with long term, because they are rooted in something more real than the fantasy that you're trying to find and trying to get and trying to experience. But of course, I think this takes some time to really understand and really become aware of if you experience it. So I would say, if you are just somebody that thinks, I'm so indecisive, I'm always flip-flopping, I can't trust myself because the last time I was so sure about something, I ended up not wanting to do it, a couple of weeks later. If you are that person, if that resonates with you, think about whether or not you are just looking at things, these decisions, these opportunities, these things that you're going after from a perfectionist mindset. If you're thinking, I have to know immediately, right away, 100%, no room for getting more information, no room for being challenged as I progress through the stages. Because of course, being challenged in your decision is important for you to understand if that's actually what you want. So you want to create space to be challenged. You want to create space where the fantasy is, the bubble of the fantasy is burst, because that'll show you if it's actually still something that you want, right? So as an example, if you are trying to find this perfect career or something, right? And you've decided from the get-go, it's going to be this. It's going to be, I don't know, marketing, let's say, as an example. It's going to be marketing. I'm going to be a marketer. I'm going to be whatever. And I've decided, and that's it. Now, of course, as you progress through the stages of getting into this kind of career, you're going to learn about things that you like, which is great. And you're going to learn about things you don't like about it too. And you're going to have to accept all of it. All of it exists. So if you leave space for that, that's great, because then you'll understand more and more, okay, this is what it looks like. This is what it's going to look like. Life requires discomfort sometimes. So even a job that I like is going to have things that I don't like. But if you are in the fantasy mindset and the perfectionist mindset, you're going to look at this and say, oh, now that I'm seeing something like a fault or something that's not right or something that's uncomfortable about this job, then maybe it's not the right job for me. Maybe I need to find something different now because it's not perfect, because it's not 100% relieving me from discomfort. But of course, that's not realistic. So there's going to be no job that does that for you. So I hope this was helpful. I hope it was informative. I hope it gave you something to think about if you consider yourself a flip-flopper, if you consider yourself indecisive and you are losing self-trust because of it. Maybe it's not that you're inherently bad. That's what I'm trying to get at. Maybe it's not that you're bad. Maybe it's not that you're incapable. Maybe it's not that you're stupid, which might be what the self-loaning narrative is in your mind. Maybe it's just the way you're looking at it. And that is a simple fix. Obviously easier said than done, but it is a simple fix. So I hope this helped. And if you want to, learn more about these things, you can go follow my other social media accounts. I also have a Substack where I write about topics like this if you want to go read them. And also it's a great way to support my content if you're interested. But other than that, I'll be back again soon with another episode.